welcome back to the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators with your host, me, Dr. Asia. Sarah and we're laughing because, folks, we already recorded 23 minutes of this episode without pushing the record button. I don't know how that happened. And we're going to come from a place of joy and laughter about this as we sit, because we were saying, should we start over? What we're going to do? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. So we're going to start over again and we're going to give it the same amount of juice as we did when we first imaginary recorded it. Okay. So y'all going to have to stick with us as we start over again. And it was good too. And we just going to do it. So, all right, folks, here we go. Hey, Sarah, welcome back to your real episode. I'm so glad you're on our episode. Like I said before, um, met on LinkedIn, ran into each other at an event here in Denver, and said, like, yeah, let's connect. We sat down at Quint's Coffee House. Shout out to Quint's and the folks over there, Jenna and Kate. We love you. And now we're here
Yes.
on the episode. So, yeah, again, tell us. Tell us your education journey. Start with your sister. She'll love this. How'd you become an educator? What's your story?
Oh, hi. I am Sarah Graham. I am the founder of Lessons and Liberations, a structural design company, creating curriculum that uplifts queer and marginalized voices. And thank you for having me again, Asia. It's never too late to start again. That was the theme from last week in my life. That it's never too late to start again. So
Amen.
here we
Amen.
go. Starting again. But my education journey began in the womb. I've always known I wanted to be a teacher. I came out telling people what to do. No, but I did come out always loving education. I think that was probably instilled from my mother. I talk about her in a couple different interviews where I talk about just like um, the value of reading and learning that she placed on the whole household, the whole community. There was never a doubt that you were going to college. Like some people like actually have to talk about like what they're doing after high school was just like, I don't know, a value set that was ingrained that we were gonna go to college. Like
Yeah, same.
um and we all did. There wasn't a single one of us who hasn't gone to college. And some siblings have like multiple degrees. So I've always wanted to be a teacher. I've always loved education, and my first teaching experience was playing school with my little sister. And I would create the worksheets, and I'll take my ruler and line up all the math problems and numbers just right, and like spend all this time on it. And then by the time I was done, she'd be off playing something new and different, and she'd be done with school. But I'd save those worksheets and I'd keep them in the folder and make her do them later. And she told me actually, because I told her this story when I got older recently, this was in the past like year or two, that she hated playing school with me. And I was like, what? How do you hate playing school? Like, that was my favorite game. And she said, you used to always make me play those or finish those worksheets. And I was like, yeah, those, I worked hard on them. So it really is a lesson in education that if students aren't engaged, they're not going to be present and they're not going to learn
Yeah.
anyways. So no matter how good the worksheet is, because I made good worksheets back then, and I'm still making amazing, phenomenal, innovative worksheets now.
I love
Um,
that. I love that.
so that was the very, very beginning. But the formal education started at UNC Greeley, the University of Northern Colorado, in Greeley, Colorado. And I went to school for a special education degree and just really fell in love with helping students succeed at their level, and that is the crux of special education.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your first pre interview, we'll just call it that, in the pre interview, that you definitely taught in what would be considered, like, for money people, an untraditional setting or
Yeah.
settings. And actually, we're seeking out those types of settings based on your own way of showing up as a child. Tell us about that,
Mhm.
please.
Yeah, so my education career, or my teaching career really started when I started working in group homes and day treatment centers for, students with emotional and behavior needs. And I just really fell in love with it because I was a really stubborn child. My mom used to always say, you know, "Sarah gonna do what Sarah wants to do." And I was actually like, "What?" Those were the words that she said when I came out to her. She's like, "Well, you always gonna do what you wanna do, so do
Might as well. I love that. Shout out to Lois. Shout out to you.
it, Mommy Lois." So I fell in love with kids who had that same sentiment, like, "I'm gonna do what I wanna do." And, you know, a lot of theirs was like this, well, trauma response and those intricate parts of it, but it's also I really wonder, like, if you were to look at some of those students now and, like, talk about grit and talk about determination, like, what they went through and where they are now, and, that would be really interesting. But I really loved, being able to take the structure of education and adapt it for students' needs based off of where they were at in their educational career, in their emotional body, in their developmental body, and I taught at a day treatment center as my first teaching job. And it was two classrooms, a two classroom building, and there were some offices where the therapists worked, and there was a lower classroom and there was an upper classroom. And I taught the lower classroom, which was probably about 10 students in grades 3 through 8. And we were just in there, just figuring it out together with a teacher assistant. And they would have therapy in the middle of the day, and, you know, sometimes the school day would be disrupted, and things would be thrown around, and by the end of the day, it would be put back together, and apologies would be mended, and, you know, practicing the skills of emotional regulation, and, you know,
Yeah.
the pyramid that we just spent hours on creating was destroyed, and, you know, students had to forgive and work together to create anew. And, I really was able to adapt and adjust the curriculum for students' needs based off of their preference, and really based off this idea of the window mirror, right? It's like how are we representing ourselves in the curriculum, and then how are we exposing students to new ideas and new thoughts and new voices, and narratives. And the first time I was able to really do that outside of, you know, teaching in the undergraduate program, which they don't actually prepare you to teach lessons, is teach you the legalities of IEPs and special education and 504s, which is amazing because I can write an amazing IEP and very legal, but they didn't teach you how to connect with kids on an authentic level, on a culturally responsive level. So being able to do that in a day treatment center in such a secluded place where it was like no one was really overseeing the curriculum that I put in front of students. It was really like, are they meeting their IEP benchmark goals? And even earlier, we talked about it wasn't even about testing. It was just like, are they, you know, able to regulate themselves to be like safe around each other?
Yeah.
So through that, I was able to do what I wanted in the curriculum, and there were so many things you can do to meet a standard. Like a standard is what's a standard? Like, give me any standard I can fit any social justice component into that standard. And so, but what I chose to do was a around the world theme, and it was really intricate and intriguing. And I taught all the subjects, so it was really immersive. We would study a new country every month, and within that month, we do all of our math around that country, and we do all our science and social studies and English around that country, and it was really engaging. And that was actually so I taught there 2 years. My first year, I did not know how to do that. It was, whew, that was rough. But when I came
Yeah.
back the second year, I said, "Oh, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna do what has brought me here, which is be stubborn, be, you know, be that innovative person and how I think in general." And when I came back with that around the world unit and saw how engaged students were, it that was a wrap. I said, "Oh, I can do this. I don't need to just do any curriculum. I can do my curriculum and it can be effective."
Yeah. I think that this idea of being able to teach what you know is best for children in the way that's best for that particular group, right? Because every year the vibe is different, of course.
Well,
It may not necessarily work every time that particular idea um, or set of objectives, but just having that freedom, so many educators will never know. Some of them because they won't have taught long enough to get to a place of
mhm,
feeling confident about teaching from seed in their mind, and some of them because districts and schools are so adamant that they use a textbook or a set of textbooks that they never get a chance to teach all these beautiful ideas that they have in their mind, especially towards social
mhm.
justice. I remember my first year teaching, we had Houghton Mifflin's
Okay.
language arts. I mean, we had a grammar book, a spelling book, a hardcover
Yeah.
anthology, and I held on to that like it was the great Bible. You couldn't tell me anything. I'm like, today is Tuesday. We're on page 7. The next, and I held on so tightly. By the time that I left teaching, I was
But
also teaching social studies, or excuse me, social justice and math as two separate classes. And the ways that I was able to like critically think about like what do I want my students to know and to be able to feel deeply in this social justice work. It was so
mhm,
much fun to teach
mhm.
uh, that curriculum that really we co-created as a class, right? So I
Yeah.
just wanted to say pause and say that I got the idea of being able to teach the things that you come up with is such a freedom.
Mhm, mhm. And teach the truth at
Yeah,
that, right? It's like, oh, we can teach these textbooks, but a lot of these textbooks is falsehood. It's made up.
yeah,
So I really love this idea of like you being able to disrupt it by the end. It reminds me that my first year teaching, I remember this because I went back and was looking at something. I was like, did I teach Columbus Day? I sure did teach Columbus Day. What was I? And it's just like this
yeah,
idea of being given something, being like, this is what you should do versus like trusting yourself, being like, this is how I'm going to disrupt what you're giving me. And there's beauty in that once you realize that as an educator, but it takes so many educators so long to understand that.
yeah. Did you experience any pushback from the administration or families when you lean more into the social justice route of teaching in that second year?
They didn't, and I think this goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, is that there were a lot of what I learned in these positions, because I taught in the day treatment center, and I also taught in the prison, for juvenile, boys, and what I learned in both of those was that the district didn't didn't care. They didn't care about those students. They had discounted those students. They had already, they'd already collected the money they needed for those students, and
Mm,
as far as what they learned or didn't learn, wasn't a priority for many district personnel. So, no, but I did have a lot of chance to work with families. I remember in that around the world unit, we were learning about one of the students really was into like origami and like martial arts and things like that. So speaking of like adapting, so we did Japan as one of the around the world countries that we did. And I like called up a sushi place and they were like, yeah, we'll definitely donate like sushi cheese. So like on our like
oh,
last day of Japan, and like we had all this sushi and I was like, oh, that's so sweet. It was like a lot too. I was like, oh, okay. They're like, well, how old are they? What were they like? Of course, it was like California rules, something that they
of
would like,
course.
but so no, I didn't get a lot of pushback from district personnel, but what I was able to do was bring in the community and family. I didn't get a lot of pushback from family either as far as like what I was teaching. And I feel like maybe it's because I didn't go deep enough into it. I feel like because I wasn't pushing boundaries enough within those early units. It was more like education and informative as opposed to like disruptive and like challenging.
Mm,
And so and that too, right, is a skill that you have to learn how to create lessons that are actually innovative and that actually going to challenge the status quo and disrupt some of these stereotypes and biases that we are taught at a very young age. Um, so yeah, it was a very interesting time, and those schools are no longer open, right? Like the prison, I want to say like that one went through a really huge change. I don't. I don't know how well it's doing. And both of the day treatment centers I've taught at, all the behavior group homes I've taught at, they're closed. And it's like, where do these students go? And how are they being served? Because their
Yeah.
needs haven't changed. They still have needs, but they're just not being serviced now.
Yeah, what I noticed in a school district where I used to work that I think they're bringing it more in house, and I hope that's the case that they're no longer that the schools districts are now building schools to support students that you're describing, but they don't have to leave the district's care. I guess I should
Yeah.
say. I hope that's the case for every district. I don't think it is though, and so
Really.
even though you're talking about Colorado, Denver area, we're talking to educators from all over the country who've probably experienced something similar, right? And so, yeah, we don't know. And yeah, are the students getting the type of care that you described if they are in a school district's specialized setting? We'll never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I could definitely see what you mean. Like there seems to be maybe more effective needs behavior centers that are like built in within the schools. Um, and what I found was it was still not always enough care given to those students, even within those effective needs programs.
sure.
Uh, and it was another way of seclusion versus education and inclusion, and giving like the least amount of support needed while still like promoting that they are developmentally socializing with their peers. Um, and it's a fine line and it's hard to do. And after I left the day treatments in the prisons and all the behavior specialized schools, I went into the public school sector and found that very thing that there were a lot of students who were in the effective needs program and um, were just stuck there, right? They were just
Yeah,
stuck there, even if they didn't need that service. And on the opposite side of that, there were students who I tried to get into the special needs, affective needs program who had a really hard time getting into it because of district needs. So it was really, it didn't feel to be responsive to the individual student versus like the pendulum that just kept swinging with like, this is how we're going to do it. And this is how everyone's going to do it. And then this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to be strict. And this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to be, lenient and back and forth was a real conundrum within the district.
yeah. You mentioned that you were at charter school for 8 years, and that you said you felt like you were finally finding like a middle ground or a place where
Mm,
it was working. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah. After I, left the public school sector and quite a fury, um, I
Wait.
joined
In quite a fury. We
oh, yes, with the closing of the school, the injustices, and,
they missed
oh,
that on this
we talk about
recording.
that this yeah, we didn't talk about that in this recording.
No, we gotta go back. We gotta go back. We forgot the fury because yeah, we got that in the first imaginary episode.
Well, in that public school where we talk about like whether or not students are getting the support they needed, my experience working at one of the schools was the difficulty. It took the hoops that you had to go through in order to get students into those effective needs programs, um, and we tried so hard one year to get this one boy, just one boy, and I just know that he would thrive there. And we had a really great structure. Speaking of like the fact that a lot of those programs are now in the schools, which is great to be integrated into the community. And so I was at a school that had a program in our school, and I wanted to have him be serviced in those classrooms as well. And I finally got him in there. It was took all year, it took all the testing, it took all the the behavior plans, it took all the multiple rounds of making sure that it was actually the support he needed. And I finally got him in there, and the district personnel came back and said, "No, this is still not enough." So, well, what
Mm.
else do I need to prove here,
Mm-hmm.
to show that it's enough? Because we agree, his mother agrees, like we all agree except for you. And I still fought, right? Like I still fought, and he was able to get into the program and stay into the program. and that was the last year that that school was open. In that school, there was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We didn't have 6th grade that year, and the 8th grade was going to 9th grade. So all the new school had to take in was the 7th grade class. And one of the students, that student who I mentioned, was in that um, 7th grade class I had to take. But I had also worked with the whole rest of the school, right? It was a closing school. We all hands on deck. We just had to be in there. So I worked with the rest of the class as well. And one of the students I worked with particularly was a gifted and talented black boy. So such a genius, just smart, just picked up on everything. And what we also know is that some students with gifted and talented capabilities also have behavior capabilities because they're bored, because they get through things really quickly, because they're not being challenged, and because their bar is so low for them in general. So the next year, I come back to the school that's closed, and now this new school's moved in. It's taken all of our old students along with them. And it's like happy to have them supposedly. And I go to a community meeting, and I'm talking about just the injustices I saw in that last year. That one incident being one of them. That scenario where I couldn't get the student the help that he needed. And some other scenarios where like the water fountains weren't working all school year long until the last week, and finally the district came and like fixed the water fountain so that the new school that was moving in that also happened to be majority white had working water fountains. And the school that was majority black did not. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was saying something at the community meeting. I don't remember what it was. I'm sure it was something disruptive, and that so a teacher comes up to me who worked at that school afterwards, and she said, "Thank you so much, da, da, da." She said, "I'm just so glad that we can get students the help they need, like so and so. I'm so glad that he got into the AM program." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Like, he's a genius. So why would he be in the AM program, effective needs behavior program?" And she was like, "Oh, that's just what they decided." And what turns out is they took all of the little black boys and put them in the effective needs program and then put them in the basement. And that was their 8th grade year at this like new school that moved in. And it was just so disheartening to see the system work exactly the way that it was built to work.
Yeah.
Um, and you had said in the last episode that the systems put our kids in basements. And to see that actually in play in the present, it was yeah, that was shattering. And I left public schools after that.
I'm glad you shared that story because I was saying before there are lots of folks who would think, well, like how is that possible? Or that's just one school. Or I would know if my child was put in the basement. Well, maybe it's you wouldn't know. And there are
Mhm,
more schools out here who put our kids in literal basements or off to the side or some other room or some other mobile
mhm,
and painted as something else, but they're being pushed out, right? And the
mhm,
system is working the way it was meant to work. And I think there's so many of us who are interviewed on this show who talk about the grief they experience from seeing our children in these spaces, right? And that
mhm,
vicarious trauma of
mhm.
witnessing that and not
Yeah,
being able to do anything about it or as quickly as we would want to do something about it. And it
mhm,
drives us, a lot of us, out of education or out of public schools. And I don't know how much we're talking about that when we talk about pay raises and we're talking about 4-day work weeks. Are we talking about our children being put in basements? And I think the answer
yeah,
is no,
mhm,
right? And we need to have that conversation more often. So thank you for sharing
yeah.
that story. Um, you went to charter school 8 years. Tell us about
So
it.
I was at a charter school for the last 8 years. I drank the Kool-Aid. I really bought into the value sets. I think what I loved about the charter school initially that I went to, because again, things shift and change and not always for the better. But what I saw when I started at this school was they really wanted to live out these values. They wanted these values to live in the halls and the teacher's speech and, in the lesson plans and the handouts. They wanted to see these values live, and they made these intentional decisions and practices, to make sure it did, right? Almost to the point where it was like cult-like, but,
Mhm.
I don't know. But it was still like we all drank the Kool-Aid who were there, and because we all drank the Kool-Aid, and because it was a very spiked Kool-Aid, we really were able to, invest fully into the students in a way that I've never seen students or teachers invest in communities before. Not always in healthy ways, like work-life balance, but
Sure.
in a way that was like, our students will win and our students will succeed. Um, and they made sure of that. And that's what I loved about the charter schools. They just had the drive and the mindset and the value set to drive to that, um, in a way that I hadn't seen in public schools. And maybe it's because the charter school was smaller. Maybe it was because they had more autonomy over like how they, went about things. But it's not something that you see often in public schools where you really have everyone rallying around, to and through and getting students to where they need to be.
Yeah.
But yeah. Mm.
Tell me about the work-life balance, because I've heard that lots of times when we talk about independent schools or charter schools where people are 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. no matter what. What was your
Mhm.
experience?
I don't know how people had kids there, and in fact, most teachers didn't have kids there, like, I feel like there are maybe 2 or 3 who had kids there, um, and I just don't know how. My experience was that the Kool-Aid blinded them or something? I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I didn't always work that hard. I was like, "What are y'all drinking?" Because, I believe in this value, but I'm gonna go home and go to sleep. But, um, I felt like they didn't mind, which was weird. It felt like that was for some teachers, it felt like that was their mission in life.
Yeah.
That was their life for, better or worse, and for, most of them, it actually turned out to be for worse, and it really damaged. I I think when the pendulum swings so hard, it really, swings you off your post, and so I think when someone dedicates their life to a school that they believe so deeply in, and then that pendulum swings and knocks them off their post, it really impacts their self-identity as well, because teaching, "I'm a teacher," is part of who we are, and so to have it not, um, be honored in the way that you're so accustomed to, and to have things shift and change, I feel like it really impacted people's sense of, like, self-identity. And that in turn affects their mental health.
Mhm.
But even charter schools, I I left charter schools, I left teaching, um, after the pandemic. I taught the whole pandemic, taught, online the whole time, didn't go back, and what I realized as I was teaching online was that I just loved the teaching aspect. I didn't have to do all the other things, right? It was just like, "Oh, I just get to teach you, and, like, I can
Yeah.
call you, and that's it, like, that's all I get to do, and I don't have to do the lunch duties and the bus duties." And when I left, I don't wanna do no more lunch duties because we were going back in person that next, year full time, so it was, like, 2 years on online, and I was like, I can't go back to that." In addition to, mm, when the Kool-Aid got watered down, right, when this pendulum swung and there was, like, a whole 'nother structure within the charter school, part of that reason there was new structures because people left, and they took that institutionalized knowledge with them, and so when the new leaders came in and they tried to recreate that same feeling of family and that same Kool-Aid, they didn't have the right recipe,
Mm.
um So so then there was a big, mass leaving and shifting, and so when that happened, you started to see more of those injustices that I saw in public schools creep into the charter schools. And on a personal level, um, I had a partner who taught at the school I was at, and it faced a lot of racism, faced a lot of racism from the students specifically. And, and like you said, the vicarious trauma through that, through seeing them go through that and not seeing them be supported in that from the new staff by the new leadership was really disheartening as well. I think was one of another reason I really left that specific school, and in the end had a lot to do with where I think I left teaching in general because I knew there had to be a different way. There had to be a better way.
Yeah. We talk a little bit sometimes on the show about this crossover and spillover of racial battle fatigue or anti-blackness or fill in the blank, um, because it's a real thing. The way, especially if your partner is also in education, right? Then we're getting it from all sides, um, and that can be really tough for people, especially when the expectation is that we're supposed to be backed up by our colleagues, right? I think I've talked about racial grief in the past on the
Mm,
show and how, there's this grieving due to racism where, and
mm,
I don't know the race of the folks at the school, but I will say that this belief that, you come in, they talk family, they talk community, they say these buzzwords, but then when we come up against racism or racialized incidences,
mm,
there's a lot of silence, and then
mm,
we I feel like so many of us start to see the depth of those relationships with people that we've
mm,
known forever, and we grieve that, right?
mm,
Because you
mm,
thought we were always I went to your baby shower, I babysat your dog, I did this, and
mm,
that's just not, it doesn't matter, right? And that's
yeah.
super tough. And thank you for sharing that, because it's never easy to witness that happening to someone else or yourself, and then someone else as well, especially that powerlessness for some people that they experience, where they want to be of service or help, but they can only do so much because they're going through their own things as well.
Yeah, yeah. And the emotional labor. You know, talk about that in
Yeah.
that fever with like you got it. And I think that's also why I left was because I was like, yo, I do not have the emotional regulation to regulate myself and another human being that's 13, which is the worst age ever. So I just can't.
Facts.
So
Facts.
so I left, and luckily before I left, I had really built up my skill set. I had dedicated my whole life to teaching and education, and between special education, I also taught English. I was also the director of special education, and then in English language or English language development. Um, and really was able to hone in this skill of creating culture responsive curriculum that was rigorous, that was immersive, that was engaging, and that was still able to meet standards because anything can meet a standard, really.
Yeah.
Um, and I really left with a lot of knowledge and armed with the skill to make significant change outside of the school system. And so I'm excited for this next journey and this next step that's in process, and it's just blooming. It's just
Yeah.
blooming.
And we're going to get into that. We're going to actually go to break and have a few more questions. We definitely are going to get into what you're doing now, because I feel like folks need to be talking to you and tapping in and emailing you. But we'll take this break and then we'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to the show. Sarah spitting knowledge, all the things. If you gotta listen to the whole thing straight through if you are getting somehow found yourself in the middle of this episode. So you talked about like the pandemic, all the things, the fatigue, being the reason why you decided not to return back to the classroom, not having to do lunch duty, not having to do all the duties. And so let me ask you a question. What is it that you feel that school districts and unions and independent schools can do to keep Black educators in classrooms, at school sites, paraprofessionals? What do you suggest that they do to keep us in those spaces?
Mm. I think there's right now. I feel like I should have came up with my answer because now I have like all these ideas. But I think one that comes to mind is mm, I wish it was more positive. I wish I could be like more positive in this phrasing, but it's just like this idea of don't run us out when we speak up and say stuff. You know, it's like don't I've seen so many black educators who try to disrupt, right? Try to um speak up and they're silenced and fired or pushed out. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was like, how can you say that in a positive manner? Listen, without backlash. I think that's what it is. It's like don't punish us for just speaking the truth and sharing what we witness.
I like
Also,
to
don't
say,
question.
I like to say white lash. I like to say white lash. But go ahead, continue, continue.
That's hilarious. um, don't question if I don't want to say don't question if it's true, but don't like believe us. Like believe us. Like there's so many things like, is it really like that? You know, leaders when you go to leaders, but what happened? But no, this is the narrative. This is my perspective. This is my where I'm at. This is my point of view. Um, and instead of believing that things are happening or believing that this is an issue or a problem, um, choosing to put a different solution in that doesn't match the problem type thing. I think those are what I've seen the most with black teachers is like they'll bring up an issue and they're chastised, or they'll bring up an issue, they're not believed. What's the word for that? I don't know. I think beyond that is like not making them the token. You know, I don't want to be the token black person who speaks up during the one DEI session we have once a year. Um, to speak on the behalf of all black people. I don't want to do your identity work for you.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest things is do the identity work. If you do your own identity work and you challenge your own biases and you call each other out, then that leaves me less emotional labor that I have to do to call you out.
Yeah. And that I love that emotional labor. That I don't love emotional labor, but I love that you keep saying that because it is it's labor and it's free, right?
Hmm.
And you said that I have to call you out on it. And there's so many folks who've decided that they no longer want to call people out. They're just exhausted from calling people out with no
Hmm.
change being made, right? And so they just become
Hmm.
resentful and silent. And I'm not blaming anyone for that because a lot of us love teaching or want to stay in the profession and just need to figure out how to pick their battles so that they can stay where they want to be. That's not
Hmm.
everyone. Obviously, it's not me because I am not teaching anymore. But that's super tough to be the one that's always having to call folks out, especially in schools where you might be the only person of color, the only black person in
Hmm.
that building. And so it's like, what do I do with that? How do I not hold the burden of trying to teach folks who don't want to be taught?
Yeah, yeah, and trying to change mindsets that have been ingrained since birth that you're not even willing to investigate.
Yeah, yeah.
I
How can you convince someone that their grandma is racist? Like that's essentially what I feel like DEI work in schools.
yeah.
Like no, that you it's impossible to change the mindset of folks who don't want their mindset changed because that would essentially mean that you're basically telling them, well, your family's been racist since the beginning of time and you have to figure that out for yourself. Like go journal about that. And that ain't happening, right? So yeah. Yeah, that's
I
tough.
don't know. also think it's like, because I embody so many identities, because I'm a big, bald, black, queer lady, um, there's a lot of experiences, right? Privileges and oppressions that I experience, and one of the privileges of being who I am is that I get to be so reflective and
Mm.
whenever I enter a space, because it's how, we're taught to assess whether the space is safe or not. But I never recognized the privilege of the fact that I think like people don't always think about this. I was talking to my friend, they were like, no, not everyone thinks about like privileges and pressures. Like not everyone thinks about how they think. Not everyone thinks about all these different things. And I'm like, I'm so grateful that I have the capabilities to be so reflective and the opportunities to be so reflective every day. And we
Yeah.
had to teach. That's not unless it's something that you practice, you have to teach that skill to the teachers.
Yeah. Teaching critical thinking to teachers. Woo, as they try to teach critical thinking to students. Another episode, another time. So, my favorite part of the show is this next section. And I'll start off with asking the question: is there a Black educator that you would like to shout out?
Black educator. I have so many black educators I want to shout out.
Go for
Uh,
it.
and when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about those who've also paved the way and those ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And when ancestor that just became an ancestor this year at the ripe age of, oh my goodness, how old was she? Young, late 20s, early 30s, is Lindsay Papool. And she works for a charter school here in the Denver metro area for 13 years at one school and worked her way up and was like amazing and incredible. But it's just like, I love the work that she put into building community. We talk about institutional knowledge, and she's was just amazing at creating that safe environment for students. So shout out to our ancestor, Lindsay Papool. Shout out to Michelle Blades, to Webster Johnson, to Deanna Hudson, to Keela Day, to
Ah,
Dr.
Keena
Jamea
Day.
Purdue.
Shout out.
Shout out to the. I also want to shout out, I was thinking about this. Shout out to my seventh grade teacher, Mrs. Washington, at Burt Rumble Middle School in Warner Robins, Georgia. Because I gave her, I feel like she was like the only black teacher I had, and I was not super nice to her. So wherever
Mm,
you are, Mrs. Washington, shout out to you. Look at me now.
I love that. Anybody else?
Oh, shout out my mommy. I think she's a great
Yes.
educator. I also have a lot of educators in my family, so shout out to my aunties, auntie educators, and social workers.
Yeah, that's hard work. Um, what are you doing now? We want to hear. You kind of gave us a
Yeah.
preview at the very beginning, but we want to hear everything about your business, your curriculum development, all the things that you're doing.
All the things, all the things. I'm creating a more just and liberated world, and I'm doing that through lessons, and I'm doing that through curriculum, and we're creating some really dope, innovative, transformational, queer, intersectional modules, and it really goes into how we um, these are not isolated incidents. These are not, we are just one type of person. We are many, many things. We are made up of many identities. And because of that, like, we need to see how they overlap. We need to understand that this fight is not just a one person fight. Like, the fight for liberation is a fight for everyone's liberation. And I'm really excited about these modules. They begin with like the queerness, and it really goes into like queer and ethnicity and queer and religion and queer and gender, and really beginning with like the ABCs of queerness. So what does that mean? And the fact that we've always been here, we're always going to be here, and we are integrated into every identity. Um, So that's one thing I'm doing is these turnkey modules. I'm also creating some really amazing customized curriculum for the Matthew Shepard Foundation right now. We're creating a erase hate unit. And it also really looks at this catalyst of change and laws and looking at it also through an intersectional lens. Um, I'm really excited about the trainings and the coaching sessions that I'm starting to do, with a couple different schools and, teaching what does it mean when we talk about liberatory education, and also teaching how do we create social justice education lessons because it's a skill that, if not done effectively, will actually do more harm than good. And it's a skill that not everybody is taught when they go to teacher college. So it's a lot of different prongs of what we're doing. And then the next prong that's coming out in 3 years are our liberation centers where students can come and practice some of these liberatory skills they learned in the curriculum in these spaces that are safe, where they're not taxed with being the simulated bad guy, um, but they do have opportunities to intervene and to practice what it looks like to have a more just world. So lots of things.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So it sounds like you work with schools, nonprofits, foundations to create,
Yeah.
build curriculum. Okay. And how do people find you if they want to reach out? And we're going to talk about the sabbatical because I can't let you off the hook without talking about that. But when you get back from having fun in the sun, if your books are not booked, how could people find you? Or just if they want to ask you a question, how do they contact you?
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, Lessons in Liberation. You find me on LinkedIn. You can also find Lessons in Liberation on LinkedIn. You can go to our website at lessons-in-liberation.com, or you can email me at sarah at lessons-in-liberation.com.
Thank you. Now, normally the next question would be what's bringing you joy these days? But I'm going to have to go back. So, folks, a little backstory. I was talking to Sarah a while back, and Sarah says, "Yeah, I'm not taking any more clients right now because I'm going on sabbatical. I don't know where I'm going to go. I'm just going to be gone. I'm just going to be living my best life." And I was like, "That's nice." And so I need you to talk to folks about this sabbatical and the reason why, or I'm calling it sabbatical. You could call it something else, obviously. I think the reason that people need to hear it is because this need for rest, right? Educators in and outside the classroom, we we need time for rest and we need time for a reprieve. And so I want people to hear what you, as a bald, black, big queer woman, is that what you said? Yeah, what you're doing to take care of yourself. So please share about this time of rest for you, and then ended up in this conversation with what's bringing you joy these days.
Yeah. Rest is resistance. That's
Yeah.
certainly what it is. And we can't do this resistance work without rest. So I am taking some time off to reground, to reconnect, to recenter, and I'll be heading to the beaches and some spiritual retreats, hopefully. A couple different places, Bali, the Maldives, maybe Costa Rica. I haven't decided all the places yet, but what really is driving this need is um, the need to escape.
Say it again for the folks. Wait, wait, wait. Say it again for the folks in the back. What is it a D for?
The need to escape, like, there's just so much right now. The need to escape, the needing to reset is so heavy right now. I'm like, "Well, maybe I could just move out of the city, like, I could just go to nature." I'm like, "That's not enough of a reset." Like, I need a hard button, like, factory reset so I can come back wanting to continue to do this work. Because I think it's like we get to the point where we burn ourselves out, well,
Yeah.
the desire, the motivation is not even there anymore. And I do want to do this work. I still want to do it. And I recognize that the emotional labor that this takes to do this research, to present to people, to change mindsets, requires a significant amount of rest and a significant amount of peace during that rest to do that. So I am doing a sabbatical, and then I'll end it with a work retreat. I will come back and perfect some things and have it ready for when I come back in 2025. Um,
Y'all,
and
Sarah's smiling so hard right now.
and
So, will you? I'm gonna just come on back in the next year. So write notes. Take those notes down, folks. Yes.
so I'm excited for all of it, but I'm really excited. I am excited for the rest and sabbatical and the clearing of my mind so that I can do the work because I am ending with a deep work session, and I probably take a little break after that. But um, there's something about deep work. So much of our work is shallow work,
Yeah.
and disrupt it that we can't really dive into the nuances and intricacies to really come up with an engaging, effective way to do this work. So I'm excited for both of those things. The sabbatical will be amazing, and the time to just focus will also be amazing as well. So planning has been bringing me joy for it. Um, I think this idea of like ending and starting new things has brought me a lot of joy. And in that, really assessing who and what I want to have continue in the next path and in the next journey and next leg of this. Um, and and then making sure those bonds are solid, right? Because it's like I won't be talking to most people for the next 3 months. So being able to spend time with the people who I do want to spend time with before I leave has also been bringing me a lot of joy. Um, and being with community where you don't have to perform, you don't have to show up anyway, you
Oh
can just show
yes.
up yourself,
Yes.
um, is what's bringing me joy these days.
Well, folks, if you're in Costa Rica or the Maldives or Thailand or Bali and you just run into Sarah, tell her what up, what's going on. Uh, yeah. And so I need y'all all to get free so we can be like Sarah.
Get
Get on,
free,
get free, get free.
get
Um,
free, get
and
liberated.
yeah, get liberated. So if you happen to be on Sarah's calendar before she hops out, good for you. If not, oh well. This has been another fantastic episode of the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. Thank you, Sarah, for coming on.
Thank you,
And
Asia.
yeah, of course. And we'll talk to you all later. Peace.